Hello, I'm Colin. Welcome to this Chaparral Motorsports motocross boot try-on haul. This isn't a review of any of these boots. It's basically going to be a fit and feel. Now, all of the boots here on this table are top-of-the-line motocross boots, boots that are worn in Supercross, starting at $559, ranging up to $629 in price. I'm going to put each of these boots on, and then we're going to jump onto the bike, and I'm going to give you an in-boot description of how I'm feeling on the pegs in the riding position. Now, all of the boots here are a size 9. I typically wear a size 9 in just about every boot that I've ever worn. The discrepancies we're going to have here is Sidi calls theirs a 9.5, even though it is a 43 across the board here. And the other outlier is going to be that Fox Instinct. While it calls itself a 9, its European size is a 42.5. So essentially we have 43s here in size 9s, starting at the least expensive boot, the Fox Instinct, and working our way this way. Let's get started. These buckles are so easy to use, it's almost impossible to get it wrong. And this is a nice, tight feel. I think that European size might be correct, and that size 9 American might be a little bit snug. So first thing I'm gonna say about these boots is there's no Velcro closure holding these tops closed. Now we have another Fox video that we did previously, and they said that that was so that when riders are in here, they don't get a binding effect. When they bend their ankles, this shin plate can actually flex and move. Due to the fact that these buckles are nice and tight, I don't know that I'm feeling it shift and move anyway. But initial fit, these are really snug, but they would be the correct size boot. So again, I am a 9. If I went any larger than this, they'd be sloppy on my feet. The toe box on this boot really angles down, almost like a ballerina shoe, if you will, or a rock climbing shoe is what it feels like. There's lots of room in the heel, so my heel is actually moving around quite a bit on the inside, but the toe box itself is really, really tight. Feel on the ankle, these feel really good. The sole has a really firm feel all the way across the bottom. All right. That's what I got for standing on the ground. Now, let's get onto the bike. All right, so jumping up onto the pegs, what am I feeling? Feels pretty good. I feel the peg. Ooh, where's the brake at? So as far as the brake goes, if I were just to put my foot down, I'm gonna miss it. I gotta angle in pretty far in order to be able to get to that brake pedal. On the shifter side, boot feels really good, actually. Peg feel on the ball of my feet feel really good. Planted, there's lots of support there, but I can still feel the peg. So the toe box on this is relatively narrow, like short. So that feels good, not as boxy. All right, now that we're done with the Fox Instinct, we're gonna move on over to the Sidi Crossfire 3 SRS boots. After having been on the bike, let's take a look at the bottom of the sole. You can see that there are no marks on the bottom of the sole. So this is gonna be very robust and will last a long time while jumping around on your off-road foot pegs. Next, we're gonna jump into the Sidi Crossfire 3 SRS boot. SRS meaning sole replacement. So you see these screws down here? These screws allow you to replace this sole easily by just turning a couple screws. Unlike the Fox boot, this boot has 2 different Velcro areas that allow this boot to stay secure on your foot. So the buckles, this is obviously a metal piece. The buckle itself is plastic. Engagement on the buckle is nice. Fits pretty easy. Again, a very, very tight fit around the toe here. Probably tighter than the Fox boot. So the buckle adjustment on this is really easy. You just lift up out of this tab, pull it out as far as you want, and then in order to get that back in a little bit smaller, you just release it again, and pull that back down into place. So initial feel and step into these boots is they are just as tight, if not a hair tighter than the Fox Instinct boot. That being said, my toes aren't quite as crowded. So the actual front part of the boot here has just a little bit more space than that of the Fox. The other thing I feel is the footbed feels flatter, and it feels like my foot itself is closer to the ground. So it's a little bit higher off the ground in the Fox than it is in these Crossfire 3s. Another thing I want to mention is the heel cup. The heel cup is super robust. These feel like I'm gonna have lots of protection as far as impact goes, but the actual distance of my foot to the foot peg is gonna be less than it will be in the Fox, is what I think I'm gonna feel. Flex in the ankle is about the same on both boots, but my heel does not slip. My heel is locked in on these boots, so it feels like my foot's being hugged all the way around on this boot, versus the Fox boot, I was being hugged in the toe, but was really loose in the heel. All right, now let's see what these boots feel like up on the motorcycle bike, on the peg specifically. So stepping onto the bike, I'm gonna say that the footbed of these boots are more stiff than that of the Fox. I can feel the peg, I'm close to the peg, but the actual material between my foot and the peg feels like it's more robust, if you will. The top part of the boot here is a lot thinner, so I think the circumference here is less. So even just standing here on the pegs as I would be rolling down the road, I can reach forward and make contact with the brake without having to do a big shift in like I had to do with the Fox boot. Now over here on the shifter side, while the actual upper part of the boot feels more flexible, that sole being a little bit more rigid, I've actually got to shift more of the whole boot down and underneath that shift peg in order to be able to make that action happen. These are definitely easier to slip out of than the Fox boots were. The Fox boots I had to work to get out of, which is interesting because with that heel box being so loose, I would have thought I would have been able to slip right out of the Fox, but they were tough to get out of, versus these are easy to slip out of. And I think that's because this area right here is a much larger opening. So that pressure on the top of the foot just didn't exist with these. If you take a look down here, just being on those pegs for just those couple of minutes, you can see some pretty good divots in here. So this is a very, very soft sole, which is replaceable with just removing these 4 screws. But it's a good thing it's replaceable because it's gonna wear out really quick. So just a difference in design. The Fox boot is gonna wear longer and not have as much destruction on the sole as this Sidi boot that is really soft and pliable. That being said, this boot stuck to the peg really, really well. Now we're gonna jump into the new Tech10 DHCP boots. Now this is gonna be the only boot in the lineup that has an internal ankle brace. Now, another thing I want to point out is all of the other boots, the buckles came down and latched towards the outside. This boot here, the buckles actually latch to the inside. I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but that is a difference that we're noticing on this one that we didn't see on the others. Opening up, we have a single Velcro here at the top, and this boot opens up really far all the way down here to the bottom. Again, I mentioned just a second ago, this is the ankle brace that comes inside the Tech10. They're the only boot in this lineup that does have an internal ankle brace. So we'll have to see what that feels like as we're trying these on. So initial slip in, the booty itself is pretty tight. Now this really is just an ankle brace. There's really no sole support on it at all. So the bottom of the booty is like a rubberized feel, and the top is just a meshish fabric. Has a good feel to it. The heel cup here is a nice robust piece of plastic, as well as the ankle support brace here. So here we go. Let's go ahead and slip into the main boot itself. This is really cool. Check this out. So everybody has their own unique fit and kind of where they want that buckle to kind of angle across. It's nice. Absolutely no binding can happen there. The engagement on these buckles, they almost close themselves. Once you get them to 2/3 of the way, they do close themselves. Boom, it's kind of nice. So with that internal brace on my foot, that breakover angle to get into the boot is a little bit tight. I think it also has to do with the rubberized bottom that's on that ankle brace. So slipping into the boot, that rubberized boot just wants to catch on the bottom. So the slide in was a little bit tough. All right, so initial feeling, standing up, the actual room inside the toe box is significantly larger than that of the Instinct boot from Fox or the Sidi Crossfire 3. I get the same hugging effect in the heel cup area that I had with the Sidis. I mean, overall out of the box, just standing up, I think it's one of the best feeling boots so far. So the overall ankle support, I feel like I'm not being able to bend very much, but when I look down at the actual boot, there is some flex there. So it's interesting. If I were not to look down, it feels like my ankle's not moving at all. The other thing that I feel is if I rock my knees forward, my heels come up off the ground. That's how supportive and kind of secure my leg is in there. If I was gonna come off a jump and be on the balls of my feet, boom, these things are absolutely gonna take that impact and absorb it. Whereas the other boots, I would definitely be folding at the ankle. Now the other boots have lockouts, so you can only go so far, but the initial energy absorption, if you will, that this boot would offer, I think is really great. So this feels like, as far as a walking boot goes, it's stiffer, but I'm getting more toe flex than I had in the others. All right, let's jump up onto this bike and see what it feels like. Oh, that's nice. So first thing I gotta say is my tactile feel of my toes on this peg is like, bam, right there. Feels really good. But on the heel of my foot and even the arch, I feel disconnected from the peg. It's strange how the toe feels so tactile, but the arch of my foot feels so disconnected. Although I have a disconnect between my foot and the peg itself, I feel like for whatever reason, the boot is more planted on the bike. I absolutely feel like I have more flexibility and more maneuverability in these boots than I had in the other two, which is counterintuitive because they felt like they didn't flex as much down on the floor. But on the bike, I feel like I have more movement and accessibility. You know, when a motorcycle jacket's made in that riding position, it's comfortable when you're on the bike, but when you're walking around town, it kind of feels awkward and you got some bunches up under your armpits. It's almost what these boots feel like. Standing on flat ground, walking around, they felt a little awkward, but here on the bike, they have a better feel, I think, than I've had than in the other two boots. As far as the brake goes, I have complete brake coverage, so these boots are definitely allowing me to get great brake access. On the shift side, very similar to that of the Sidis, I'm having to actually physically move my foot in order to get that toe box underneath the shifter. And I think that has to do with that disconnect that I'm feeling between my heel and that foot peg. All right, let's grab the chair and get out of these boots and on to the Gaernes. So as you can see here from the AlpineStars, this is a very soft material down here. You can see the dimples from the pegs. These are probably gonna wear out pretty quick, but they are resellable if you send them back to AlpineStars. All right, now let's jump into the Gaerne boots and see what they feel like. First thing I'm gonna say is these are old school buckles. So very old school, traditional, the way that the buckle goes through the round part of the strap, where these all have a newfangled way of having a hook in there that gets grabbed and pulled. These are more of like that old school buckle style that we've seen. Another thing that's old school about these boots is they have the welt sole that all motocross boots used to have. But now, as you can see from the other top brand boots here, everyone's gone to a molded sole. Now, what we've been told from the manufacturers is the reason they've done that is they're able to make your foot sit further down into the footbed. So I'm curious to see with these Garni SG12s if I feel like my foot is sitting higher off the ground or on top of the boot, if you will, as compared to the others. So the first thing I'm gonna say that I feel here is the fact that the inside of this boot is significantly larger than any of the other boots I've had on. There's absolutely zero squeezing or pinching, which I did feel on the Fox and the Sidi, not so much on the AlpineStars. Now, while these buckles are the old school style, they function really smoothly, so I'm really impressed with that. Let me go ahead and tighten this guy down just a little bit more. Garni SG12s. Wow. So what I do notice on these is the fact that the rollover or the breakover feels like the bottom of the sole of this is like rounded. So I'm gonna sit down real quick because these are really interesting feeling compared to the rest of the ones that we've looked at so far. So an interesting thing that I'm feeling here is I'm feeling like I have a contact patch right here in the center of the boot that I can feel on the ground. But none of this is on the ground and nothing around the perimeters on the ground, just this center piece here. And then the boot itself can rock almost like it's on a ball. It's really interesting. Versus the other boots had much more of a flat sole to them. Very, very different way of doing things. Now, as far as the feel of the boot, as far as whether I feel like I'm further off the ground, I really don't. I feel like I'm in more of like a work boot instead of a motocross boot, on the sole that is. I gotta say that the upper is probably the most comfortable of all of the uppers that I've been in so far as the interior fit and finish goes. Ankles, lots of flexibility there. I don't feel like I have a stop though. So that lockout feel that I felt in the other boots almost feels like it's missing or is not quite as pronounced as it was in the other boots. My heel is definitely nice and secure in there, kind of wraps around, and then there's lots of room in the toe area. So my toes can actually move up and around inside this toe box. So for an all-day comfort, I'm gonna say that these Gaerne boots are probably the #1 boot that I would pick as far as all-day walk-around comfort if I was looking to do some long-distance off-road or adventure riding. All right, now let's jump up onto the bike and see what these feel like on the bike. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna say that I feel is the fact that these are very similar to the Sidi and the Fox in the fact that the entire footbed feels the same consistency, if you will. I don't feel like it's softer in the toe than it is in the center or in the heel. I feel the same sole consistency all the way through. Now, just like I had mentioned down there on the floor, what I'm feeling here is I'm not feeling as secure, if you will. If I were to come off a jump and land, boom, really hard here, I'm not feeling that I have that lockout support that I had on that AlpineStar Tech10. I will say I have good coverage on the brake. I like that. The boots feel good against the bike. As far as shifting goes, similar to some of the others, I've got to move my foot in order to make the shift, but not quite as much as I did on the others. The actual sole of the boot, how it feels on the peg, the rubber itself feels harder, if you will, than the other boots that I wore. I definitely have less material on the peg at one given time. The entire peg isn't being touched, I don't feel. So while I'm on the balls of my foot, the only part of the peg that the boot's actually making contact with right now is that front outside corner. Now I can move around and touch all aspects of that peg. So the amount of flexibility and movement that I have without the sole itself flexing is huge. So you can see that this boot here definitely got a little bit of wear. It felt it was a very thick or stiff sole, but it was still tacky on the very outside. So final impressions of the Garni SG12s are gonna be they were the most comfortable around the leg. They're most comfortable for walking around. And if I was gonna choose a boot that I was gonna be in all day long, that would probably be the boot. Now, caveat to that. If I was riding the motocross track and gonna be out there and want the most impact protection when coming down off a jump, the AlpineStars Tech10 is probably the boot that I'd go with. Well, that was really interesting. I didn't actually expect to see that much difference or variation between the fit and the function of each of the 4 boots that are up here on the table. So if you've got a narrower or a smaller foot, I'd say that the Fox or the Sidi would be the boots you want to take a look at. And if you've got a larger or wider foot, the AlpineStars or Gaerne are going to be the best fit for your style of foot. Now, as far as what I would use these boots for, if I'm looking for a boot that I'm gonna be in all day long doing a lot of different types of riding, I think the Gaerne boot was the most comfortable overall. But I've gotta say that as far as ankle protection goes, if I was gonna be riding a motocross track, moto after moto all day long, I'd probably go with the Tech10. I really don't know that it has any more ankle protection than the others, but that's just how it felt on that initial first impression. As far as a more universal feeling on the peg, I'd say the Sidi Crossfire 3 had that one in the bag. And if you're looking for just an all-around boot, something that's gonna do the job and do it well, that Fox Instinct boot, at the least expensive out of all these boots on the lineup, is a great boot that'll keep you protected and looking stylish out there on the trail. Thank you so much for joining us on this Pro Motocross boot try-on haul. Now these are the boots that the best of the best choose to put on their feet for protection and performance on a daily basis. I hope that this walkthrough of this try-on haul has given you some of my initial feedback or impressions of each of these boots that will help you pick the next best boot that you've got in your gear bag. I'm Kyle Bradshaw from Chaparral Motorsports. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care and ride safe.